Eleanor Miller was a woman everyone knew and loved. She was a loyal member of the First Presbyterian Church and a devoted grandmother to her only grandson, 17-year-old Michael Miller. Michael, a shy, bookish teenager who always kept to himself, was the only child of Eleanor's late son, a successful businessman who tragically died in a car accident a few years earlier. The news of Eleanor's death left the town reeling, whispers of foul play filling the air. Who would want to harm such a kind and gentle woman? The answer, as it turned out, was closer than anyone could have imagined. Before we get to the story, comment below where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot to me. Behind the scenes, a clandestine affair was unfolding. Eleanor, despite her age, was a woman who still exuded a youthful charm. And she had become entangled in a forbidden romance with her grandson's best friend, 18-year-old Danny Jones. Danny, a charismatic and popular student, was a complete opposite of Michael. He was the star quarterback of the Maple Creek High School football team, a heartthrob with a mischievous grin and a rebellious streak. This forbidden romance, a dark secret hidden beneath the surface of Maple Creek's seemingly peaceful facade, was about to spill out into the open, leading to a tragic chain of events that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. The news of Eleanor Miller's death sent shockwaves through Maple Creek. Her family, devastated by the loss, was left searching for answers. The police, led by Detective Sergeant John Riley, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving even the most complex cases, arrived at the crime scene. The scene was grim, the house a testament to a violent struggle. The evidence pointed to a brutal attack. Eleanor had been stabbed multiple times in the chest, her screams silenced forever. The police cordoned off the entire neighborhood, turning the once peaceful streets into a crime scene. Every resident, every car, every visitor was meticulously investigated. The town held its breath, terrified and bewildered, as the police worked tirelessly to solve the case. Michael, devastated by the loss of his grandmother, became the prime focus of the investigation. He was the only immediate family member, and his relationship with Danny Jones, the boy his grandmother was allegedly involved with, raised suspicions in the minds of the police. The entire town, it seemed, had been divided into two camps: those who believed Michael was innocent, and those who suspected his involvement. The investigation turned up a vital piece of evidence, a crumpled note found near the body. It was a handwritten note, a desperate plea for help. But the message was incomplete, torn and tattered, the words barely legible. The police worked tirelessly to decipher the scribbled words, hoping they would shed light on the killer's identity. The evidence was mounting, and the investigation was heating up. But who was the killer? Was it Michael, fueled by grief and anger? Was it Danny, consumed by a love that turned deadly? Or was there another suspect, someone else lurking in the shadows of Maple Creek? Detective Riley, a man known for his relentless pursuit of justice, dedicated himself to unraveling the mystery surrounding Eleanor Miller's death. He spent days combing through the crime scene, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing every piece of evidence. The investigation quickly focused on the two young men, Michael, Eleanor's grandson, and Danny, his best friend and Eleanor's secret lover. Michael, initially cooperative with the police, struggled to maintain his composure. He was clearly heartbroken and distraught, but he vehemently denied any involvement in his grandmother's death. However, the police noted a subtle shift in his demeanor as they pressed him on his relationship with Danny and his knowledge of Eleanor's affair. Danny, on the other hand, was a much more elusive figure. He had been a constant presence in Eleanor's life, often visiting her at her home. But he was also known for his rebellious streak and his impulsive nature. When the police questioned him, he was guarded, offering vague and evasive answers. The police discovered a pattern of secrecy surrounding the affair. Eleanor and Danny had been meticulous about concealing their relationship, using coded messages and secret rendezvous to avoid detection. They also found evidence suggesting a tumultuous relationship, marked by passionate arguments and jealous outbursts. As the investigation progressed, a web of deceit began to unravel. The police uncovered a trail of anonymous calls made to Eleanor, threatening to expose her secret. They also found evidence that Danny had been researching ways to silence someone, including the use of potentially lethal poisons. However, the evidence against Danny was circumstantial. While suspicious, it was not conclusive. The police were frustrated. They were certain that Danny was involved, but they needed solid proof to tie him to the murder. The pressure was mounting on the police, and the town was starting to lose faith in their ability to solve the case. Rumors swirled, accusing the police of incompetence and suggesting a cover-up. But Riley, determined to find the truth, continued to dig deeper, refusing to let the case go cold. He knew there was more to the story, and he wouldn't rest until he had unraveled the entire truth. The weight of suspicion began to fall heavily on Michael, Eleanor's grandson. While outwardly grieving, he displayed a detached, almost robotic behavior that fueled the whispers of his involvement. He had always been a quiet, introverted boy, but his demeanor had shifted, becoming more withdrawn and guarded. Detective Riley, ever the astute observer, noticed the subtle changes in Michael's behavior. Michael's emotional responses seemed calculated, his expressions carefully controlled, as if he were masking a darker truth. The police delved deeper into Michael's life, unearthing a hidden world of resentment and anger. They discovered that Michael had been deeply affected by his father's death. He blamed his father's business partner, a man named Edward Baker, for the accident, claiming that Baker had deliberately sabotaged his father's car to gain control of the family business. The investigation revealed a bitter dispute between Michael's father and Baker. Michael had secretly been gathering evidence against Baker, believing he was responsible for his father's death. He had confided in Danny, who encouraged him to pursue his suspicions, fueling his anger and paranoia. However, there was a significant inconsistency. Michael's father's death was ruled a tragic accident, with no evidence of foul play. Yet, Michael remained convinced of Baker's guilt. His obsession with proving Baker responsible for his father's death consumed him, and the police wondered if this obsession had driven him to commit a similar act against Eleanor. The police confronted Michael about his father's death and his growing resentment towards Baker. They questioned his motives, suggesting that his hatred for Baker could have driven him to kill Eleanor, potentially mistaking her for a target associated with Baker. Michael, cornered and desperate, adamantly denied any involvement in his grandmother's murder. He insisted that his anger towards Baker was a personal matter and had nothing to do with Eleanor's death. But the police weren't convinced. They had a suspect with a motive, a history of harboring resentment, and a potential connection to the crime. As the investigation continued, Michael remained a prime suspect, but without concrete evidence, the police couldn't definitively link him to the murder. They needed more, they needed proof. While suspicion initially focused on Michael, Detective Riley couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about Danny Jones. His evasive answers, the veiled threats, and the frantic search history on his computer all pointed towards a darker side to his seemingly charming exterior. Danny, the charming and charismatic boy who captivated Eleanor, possessed a hidden layer of complexity. He was a master manipulator, capable of charming his way into people's lives, only to exploit them for his own gain. The investigation revealed a trail of deceit woven into Danny's past. He had a history of exploiting vulnerable individuals, using his charisma and charm to manipulate them into giving him money or favors. He had a reputation for being a ladies' man, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered trust in his wake. Eleanor, in her naivete, had failed to recognize the true nature of her young lover. She had been blinded by his youthful charm and had showered him with affection, neglecting the red flags that others saw so clearly. The police uncovered a motive for Danny to harm Eleanor: financial gain. They discovered that Danny had been struggling financially, facing mounting debts and a desperate need for cash. They also learned that Eleanor had recently revised her will, leaving a substantial inheritance to Michael, a fact that Danny knew. The police suspected that Danny had been manipulating Eleanor to gain access to her money. He had become increasingly possessive and controlling, pushing her to make changes to her will that would benefit him. When Eleanor resisted his demands, he resorted to violence, eliminating her as an obstacle to his financial gain. The investigation further revealed a pattern of escalating aggression. Danny had been known to lash out at those who crossed him, demonstrating a volatile temper and a lack of empathy. This aggressive behavior, combined with his financial motives and his knowledge of Eleanor's will, painted a convincing picture of a man capable of murder. As the police delved deeper into Danny's world, the evidence against him began to solidify. They discovered a pattern of escalating aggression, a history of financial manipulation, and a clear motive to eliminate Eleanor. The suspicion surrounding Danny deepened, leaving the police with a compelling case against the boy who had seemingly stolen Eleanor's heart. While the investigation focused on Michael and Danny, Detective Riley felt an unsettling unease. Something felt off, like a piece of the puzzle was missing. His instincts told him there was another player in this game, a third suspect lurking in the shadows. The police returned their attention to Edward Baker, the man Michael blamed for his father's death. Baker, a shrewd businessman with a reputation for ruthlessness, had always been a shadowy figure in the town. He had a history of manipulating people and situations to his advantage, leaving a trail of broken promises and shattered lives. Riley recalled a conversation with Michael where he had mentioned that Baker had been making frequent visits to Eleanor's home in the weeks leading up to her death. He had also noticed a strange exchange of letters between Baker and Eleanor, filled with cryptic messages and veiled threats. The investigation revealed a complex web of connections between Baker, Eleanor, and Michael. Baker had been in a long-standing business dispute with Michael's father, a feud that had escalated after the tragic accident. It seemed Baker had been using Eleanor as a pawn in his power play, manipulating her into providing him with inside information about the family business. The police discovered evidence suggesting that Baker had been blackmailing Eleanor, threatening to expose her affair with Danny if she refused to cooperate with him. He had used her vulnerability and desperation to his advantage, exploiting her emotional fragility to gain control. Riley's suspicions deepened. Baker had a motive, a history of manipulating people for his own gain, and a clear opportunity to harm Eleanor. Could he have orchestrated her murder to silence her forever, eliminating a valuable asset and a potential threat to his business empire? The investigation took a dramatic turn when the police uncovered a series of coded messages in Baker's personal files. The messages were filled with threats and veiled references to silencing and disposing of problems. The messages, when deciphered, revealed a plan to eliminate Eleanor, a plan that hinted at a sinister plot involving her murder. The evidence was mounting, and the spotlight fell upon Edward Baker, revealing a manipulative and ruthless mastermind who could have orchestrated Eleanor's death to protect his empire and eliminate a threat. The investigation had taken a surprising turn, leading the police down a path of dark secrets, power plays, and a calculated murder. The discovery of the coded messages in Baker's files sent shockwaves through the investigation. The messages, once deciphered, revealed a chilling plan, a meticulously orchestrated scheme to eliminate Eleanor Miller. The coded language was subtle, but the intent was clear: silence her, eliminate her as a threat. The messages pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one that transcended the initial motives of Michael and Danny. The messages spoke of a larger game, a web of manipulation and power struggles that had ensnared Eleanor. The investigation delved into a world of corporate espionage, backroom deals, and a desperate fight for control. The police discovered that Baker had been using Eleanor as a pawn in his bid to gain control of Michael's father's company. He had promised her a substantial sum of money, but the offer came with a catch: Eleanor would have to provide him with information about the company's finances and upcoming projects. Eleanor, desperate for financial security after her husband's death, had agreed to Baker's demands. But she quickly grew weary of his manipulation, realizing that she was being used. She began to resist his demands, threatening to expose his scheme to the authorities. Baker, faced with a potential threat to his carefully constructed plans, decided to eliminate Eleanor. He couldn't afford to have her as a loose cannon, someone who could jeopardize his business empire. The coded messages revealed a step-by-step plan, detailing how Baker would use his resources to frame either Michael or Danny for the murder, ensuring that he remained above suspicion. The police were now faced with a complex case, one that involved a shadowy conspiracy and a ruthless businessman with a penchant for manipulation. The evidence against Baker was mounting, but they needed more. They needed a smoking gun to solidify their case. The investigation took a crucial turn when a witness came forward, a disgruntled employee of Baker's who had long suspected his nefarious activities. This witness provided the police with crucial information about Baker's illegal activities and his plans to eliminate Eleanor. With the witness's testimony and the deciphered coded messages, the police finally had the evidence they needed to expose Baker's true nature and bring him to justice. The case was far from over, but the weight of evidence pointed to a ruthless mastermind hiding in plain sight. The investigation had uncovered a dark truth, a world of manipulation, betrayal, and a relentless pursuit of power that had led to a tragic murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The coded messages, the witness testimony, and the financial discrepancies all pointed to Edward Baker as the mastermind behind Eleanor Miller's murder. Detective Riley, with a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction, orchestrated Baker's arrest. The news of Baker's arrest spread like wildfire through the small town. The community, stunned and shocked, finally had answers to the questions that had haunted them for weeks. Baker, caught off guard, tried to maintain his composure, but the facade of innocence crumbled as the police presented their findings. The coded messages, the witness testimonies, and the financial trail left no room for doubt. Baker, cornered and desperate, tried to deflect blame, claiming that he was merely a victim of circumstances, that he had been framed by his enemies. But the evidence was too strong, too compelling. The arrest was a turning point in the investigation, shifting the focus from Michael and Danny to the true orchestrator of the crime. The police, relieved to finally have a suspect they could pin the murder on, set their sights on building a strong case against Baker. The investigation into Baker's empire revealed a network of illegal activities, from tax evasion to money laundering. The police were determined to bring him to justice not only for Eleanor's murder but also for his years of criminal activity. The arrest of Edward Baker, however, did not bring closure to the case. There were still many unanswered questions. The police had to investigate the role of Michael and Danny in the events leading to Eleanor's murder. They had to examine their motivations and determine whether they had been unwitting pawns in Baker's scheme or if they had played a more active role in the crime. The arrest of Baker was a victory, but it was only the beginning of a long and arduous process. The police had a complex web of deceit and betrayal to unravel, and the pursuit of justice would require uncovering the truth behind every thread. The trial of Edward Baker was a spectacle that gripped the town. The courtroom, usually a place of quiet proceedings, buzzed with anticipation and tension. The press swarmed the courthouse, eager to chronicle every detail of the trial that would determine the fate of a man who had once held so much power. The prosecution, led by the seasoned district attorney, presented a compelling case, weaving together the evidence of Baker's manipulative tactics, the coded messages, and the witness testimonies into a narrative of calculated murder. They painted a picture of a ruthless businessman who had used Eleanor as a pawn in his quest for power and wealth, ultimately silencing her when she threatened to expose his schemes. Baker, however, maintained his innocence, claiming that he was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by his rivals. He insisted that the coded messages were misinterpreted, that the witnesses were motivated by personal vendettas, and that the financial discrepancies were simply a product of poor bookkeeping. His defense attorney, a renowned legal strategist known for his aggressive tactics, attempted to sow doubt in the jury's minds, highlighting the inconsistencies in some of the witness testimonies and questioning the reliability of the coded messages. The courtroom became a battleground of words and evidence, each side presenting their case with unwavering conviction. The jury, sequestered in a secluded room, listened intently to the arguments, weighing the evidence, and trying to piece together the truth from the conflicting narratives. The trial unfolded over several weeks, each day bringing new twists and turns. The public was captivated by the drama, their opinions swaying with each new piece of evidence presented. Some believed Baker was guilty, a ruthless mastermind who had orchestrated Eleanor's murder with cold precision. Others remained skeptical, convinced that he was a victim of a complex web of deceit and manipulation. Finally, after weeks of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the foreman announced their decision, guilty. The courtroom erupted in a wave of emotion, relief for some, shock for others. Baker, his face etched with disbelief and anger, was led away in handcuffs. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the town, but the questions surrounding Eleanor's murder lingered. The trial had revealed the dark underbelly of the town's elite, exposing a world of manipulation, greed, and betrayal. The case of Eleanor Miller, however, was not just about a single murder. It was a stark reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic places, darkness could lurk beneath the surface. The verdict against Edward Baker sent shockwaves through the community. The once respected businessman, now a convicted murderer, was stripped of his power and influence. His empire, built on deceit and manipulation, began to crumble. The immediate aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind of activity. The media descended upon the town, dissecting every detail of the case, while the townspeople debated the implications of the verdict. Some celebrated the justice served, while others mourned the loss of a man who had once been a pillar of the community. The police, relieved to have finally brought Baker to justice, continued their investigation, determined to uncover the full extent of his criminal activities. They discovered a network of corruption and illegal dealings, reaching far beyond the initial case. Baker's arrest triggered a domino effect, leading to the exposure of other wrongdoing and the downfall of those who had benefited from his criminal enterprise. The impact on Michael and Danny was significant. The initial suspicion surrounding their involvement in Eleanor's death had finally been lifted. While they had been caught in the crossfire of Baker's machinations, their innocence was now clear. However, the ordeal had left its mark, shattering their trust in those they had once considered friends and leaving deep emotional scars. Eleanor's family, relieved that her killer had finally been brought to justice, sought solace in the closure brought by the verdict. However, the pain of her loss remained, a constant reminder of the cruel hand of fate that had robbed them of a beloved mother and wife. The trial of Edward Baker became a watershed moment for the town. It exposed the dark underbelly of a seemingly idyllic community, forcing its residents to confront the reality of corruption and deceit that existed beneath the surface. The case served as a warning, a reminder that even in the most seemingly safe and prosperous places, danger and darkness could lurk, waiting to exploit vulnerabilities and shatter lives. The aftermath of the trial was a process of healing and rebuilding. The town, shaken by the events, began to grapple with the legacy of Baker's crimes and the need for transparency and accountability. The case of Eleanor Miller became a cautionary tale, a reminder that justice, though delayed, could prevail, and that even the most powerful individuals were not above the law.